Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Sweet Spot. As you can see, if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, we're here in our Sweet Spot podcast studio in Maitland, Florida, here with CTO Jason Lee at Travel Media Group. Jason, thank you so much for being back on The Sweet Spot.
Yeah, thanks for having me in the seated position.
Yes, and I feel like we should be celebrating maybe like a 10th or 15th milestone of you coming on The Sweet Spot or something like that. It's been a lot, but we're here to talk about a really important topic, something that's been bubbling up in conferences, conversations that we're having, something that you're not a stranger to. You've been doing some research on this and have some updates for us. But AI, I mean, it seems to be obviously the hot topic, like I said, at these conferences or just in the industry, outside of the industry in general. And then pairing it with guest review response, something that Travel Media Group obviously known for. We're coming up on the 2 million guest review mark. Is a fantastic milestone, really exciting milestone. But I figured we could start the episode by just kind of talking about how Travel Media Group got into guest review response. A lot of the stuff and solutions that we've talked about on this podcast have been through hotelier feedback. Talk to us a little bit about this journey in review response, and then we'll get to maybe where the state of the industry is now in AI and guest review response.
Well, working with hotels the way we have for a lot of years, almost 10 years ago, we were getting a lot of requests to do review response. And so we were like, yeah, I think we can do it. And then as we got into it, we realized like, wow, this is complicated because every hotel's different. The vibe of the hotel is different, but also the amenities and policies, the quantities, the types of sites that are have more text or less text, ratings, and like I think even getting deeper into how a hotel wants to use language, and so like it's even beyond voice, so it's like it's literally grammar and also types of words, and so I think we started in this very simple place, very innocent, like we can do this. This is going to be awesome. And I think the first offering we had was 20 reviews. It was an SLA of 20 reviews a month. It was TripAdvisor only. And so we jumped to that, and quickly, almost like instantly, it was like, well, we definitely need Google. And well, we definitely need Expedia. We definitely need Booking. So we had to adapt. And it went, the adoption was not just in the sites that we brought on, it was also in the complexity of the response. It was also in then systematically creating a flow. So the review comes in, we have a writer that writes a response, that response goes to the property. So like that stuff wasn't initially there. It goes to the property can edit it, and then it goes live back on the site. So that whole process was also sort of formulated during that first year. And then has become very perfected over time, where we've taken that and we have all sorts of mechanisms to make sure we capture hotel voice, make sure we're doing the right things, critical review pieces that we're doing. So all of these things to really sort of make it as authentic as possible. So when the guest gets that response, it's like, this is from this hotel.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people will ask, with the review response, how can you talk so much about a subject? I think we've done over 10 webinars just talking about the nuances that go into a review response, because it is a feeling, right? Which is something we're going to talk about today, because when people talk about AI, they talk typically about efficiencies and talking about streamlining processes. But really, when it comes to guest review response, the end outcome, and you've talked about this before, is you want that guest to feel heard, and you want them to feel resolved if they have an issue. You want to show gratitude if they're giving you a positive review. Any hotelier that's listening to this that has responded to a review knows the effort that it takes to respond to a review. You talked about in a video on your LinkedIn about the response sandwich and how. Talk to us a little bit about that. I don't want to give that away too much.
Yeah, the response sandwich was this sort of traditional way that we had of creating a response, and it has to do with the intro of a response, the kind of middle of the sandwich being all of the issues of the review, and then the bottom layer of bread being the sort of outro. How do we sign off of this? And I think kind of going to what you're saying, inside of that, we get into a much more complex version of that when we start to see guest emotion. So we start to like really understand where the guest is coming from. And I think if you look at like why I would respond to reviews at all, why I would even engage in the activity, I feel like number one, as a guest retention strategy, whether that's positive or negative review, I feel like it's a very strong guest retention strategy to give a great response back to the guest, because the guest doesn't experience it publicly. The guest is experiencing it through an email that they get back from the site that they wrote the review from. So they're experiencing that like directly from you. So I think you start there, it resonates with potential guests as well. So if you think of the review response as like these two major pillars of being guest retention, guest acquisition, right? In that order, you're going to have a successful review response strategy.
Yeah. And so talk to us a little bit about when you first started kind of thinking about AI and where that might fit in with review response. Maybe just that story, I think, is a really good use case for, because I'm sure there's a lot of hoteliers listening to this right now being like exploring ChatGPT and going, well, maybe this can help me respond to reviews or do some of these daily tasks that I'm told to do. So talk to us a little bit about your journey.
Well, what's interesting is that we had a project in the works for a long time. This was early days. This is maybe going back 4 years. And so we had something called predictive response that was inside of our development strategy. And the deeper we got into predictive response, and this was using machine learning and also using like traditional AI to create responses, but also sort of to like help our writers create like initial responses. And what we found immediately, right? So like as we started that is that we would have to create a model, a individual AI model for each hotel because of the complexity of a location's amenities, policies, voice. So that stuff immediately was like, we're going to have to do this. Then we then kind of pushed to the next level, which as generative AI started really coming out, we're like, whoa, this is pretty crazy. This is really interesting output for minimal input. And then as we started kind of pushing in like the early days of ChatGPT, and I think the first version that we did might have been 2.0 turbo or something. Anyway, it was like a very early version of it. And we were getting, 60% like accuracy, from that one, but it still wasn't even close, and it still didn't satisfy these other pieces. And the main pieces to that being that sort of differentiation between locations and voice.
Yeah. So talk to us a little bit. I think those learning lessons from the beginning are important, because I think it's really stuff that hoteliers should be looking out for. And we're going to kind of do a questions you should ask and, maybe reading some of these responses. But, what were some of those early lessons that you saw maybe where AI wasn't hitting the mark?
Yeah, I think in generative AI, the thing to really think about is that pretty much all output is based on input. So that is this really important flow. So input being this sort of like formulated review, and a lot of people write reviews that way. So if you look at reviews, let's say, a big chunk of them are going to have a very similar kind of cadence to them. And so that's why we have things like the review sandwich when we started off, is that you could see a lot of similarity between how people wrote. They had the good and bad of their stay, or the all bad of their stay, or the all good of their stay. But the input is really important in this case, because especially in sites like Google, actually, I shouldn't say that. All sites have a wide open input. So a guest can literally write anything about anything. They could write a whole, like we've gotten TripAdvisor reviews about it's like a life story almost, leading up to their stay. And so generative AI, even today, even the most complex version of it today has real trouble with that. It has trouble knowing what to say to it. And so it starts to empathize with the guest and talk about their life back to them, right? So you can't have that. And then you have other things that are like short sentences or sarcasm, where it also sort of has a little bit of trouble. And so if you think about it in terms of messaging, it becomes really important. If you take this casual approach to review response, which we don't, by the way, but if you take this casual approach to it, you're just like, as long as it's done, right? It's that binary thing of it's done, it's not done. We don't look at it like that. We look at it like, hey, this is communication with this guest. We think of it as we're standing in front of them talking to them. So that has to be authentic. And the second that it's not authentic, I think the reason to do it at all gets really thin.
Mm-hmm. And what we talked about is it's easier. It's going to be easier to spot, right? And we were talking about off camera how those first AI social media images that you would see on your feed. There was a different sentiment there of like, oh wow, this is cool. How did they do this? Kind of thinking about. And now you can spot it from a mile away. At least I can, as far as the AI images go, that have been generated from a specific platform. And when does that shift of sentiment start to turn about saying like that this is cool and innovative to being like, well, they just threw this into a chat GPT, or they threw it into another AI image generator and then threw it on their feed? Maybe the care and effort weren't there. And in a industry where care and service are a priority, that is never essentially the sentiment that you want to show to your customer. So in talking about kind of in that same vein with AI and efficiency, what would be some questions you ask? Because we're going to talk about it in a second. TMG has actually created a smart response. And that input output is so important, because there's going to be a lot of people right now that see this as a gap, that responses aren't being done, and come to your hotel or come to your portfolio hotels and say, well, hey, we can do this for you. It's a low price. It'll be done. Don't worry about it. What would you, if you're a hotelier on the other side, what are some questions you're asking to make sure that this is the right fit for you?
Well, I think number one, okay. First of all, I think there's a lot of like shapes and sizes, makes and models of AI response, right? I think there's a version of AI response where it's a do-it-yourself, where you go in, you see the response, you can edit it, and then you have to publish it, right? And then there's another version that I think is the full pass-through. So it's the response all the way through to the publish. So I think in both cases, obviously, you want to make sure that that all of your hotel details, and I'm talking all of your amenities, all of your policies, and anything that's happening currently, renovations, things that are closed, that those things can be added into the response model.
Okay. Quick point on this is, or example rather. So have a property, they have a parrot in their lobby named Simba. Okay. If that detail is not in there, that this is a parrot in the lobby, a AI response could royally mess up what this is. It could start addressing it as a person. It could start addressing it, it could see the name Simba and think of something else.
Yeah, it's the Lion King.
Right, exactly. So these are the details that Jason's talking about. And I think those are the little nuances that we know that would be silly of being like, well, why would I say that this is a parrot? People know that this is a parrot. It doesn't translate. Yeah.
And so I think that those things are critical. And then the next part of that would be, is there a human being looking at least your critical reviews? I would say at the bare minimum, your negative reviews, your 1 and 2 star, maybe 1, 2, 3, but for sure that there's somebody seeing it before they publish live. And the only reason why I say that is because there is just way too much variance in terms of the input. So and especially in negative reviews, and probably even more, the one that is the most variant is TripAdvisor.
And so many things can happen at a property that we've seen. I mean, we're talking about slip and falls. We're talking about discrimination claims from employees. I mean, these are things that would have a massive input. And I don't want to scare any hoteliers and think about just the negative. Let's think about the positive, right? Someone had a really meaningful, whether it's an anniversary, whether that they were visiting a loved one in a hospital and had a really great experience because an employee went out of their way to make their day. And then they're greeted with an AI response that doesn't understand the nuance of that sentiment and feeling there. I mean, that is a missed opportunity that can do just as much damage as a negative review could do. So again, when you have non-hospitality people or, even, entrepreneurs or vendors that understand the AI space, but they don't understand the hospitality, that's where you can get into some really tricky waters here. All that to say, I mean, again, at Travel Media Group, we've embraced, we've got the guest experience snapshot that we've had an episode about here, but also TMG Smart Response. Talk to us a little bit about that and kind of that story behind that development.
Yeah, so we developed TMG Smart Response, really thinking about maybe the more budget conscious hotelier looking at this other kind of tier of response. So our premium review response solution really hitting all of the marks, and with a live person writing it and a live person curating it and editing it, making sure before it goes live that all of those pieces are right. So you have this sort of 2 human touch review response process, which is like one of the best in the industry. And so then when we got to generative AI or the AI pieces, we started looking at ways of incorporating maybe that same kind of flow, but using generative AI as the writer, which we had not done previously, despite what people think. Because a lot of meetings we have, they're just like, well, this is done through AI, right? And we're like, no, it's a human. So when we started this process, what we were looking at is all the things that I just talked about, is like how much can we put in from an instruction standpoint? Like, how does the instruction set mimic the hotel voice, mimic the hotel policy, mimic the hotel amenities and their surroundings, and then also have that other like little variant, which would be when I'm renovating or when things are happening that a guest 100% is going to address if it's something major. Like if your elevators are shut down for 2 weeks, right? And everybody has to take the stairs, or even for a weekend.
You're going to hear it. Yeah. You're going to hear about it.
Yeah. So not being able to respond, not being able to respond accurately to that is a crazy miss. And so what's interesting about this is that we think of it like it's the same kind of thing. So these same notes that we have in our system for live writers, it's that same concept is going in an instruction set to the generative AI. And the reason why that's so important is because it creates accurate, thoughtful responses. But there's also a bunch of other things that we've done to our version of AI response that also makes it very special. Because one of the things that anybody who's listening to this, who's ever used ChatGPT knows, is that ChatGPT or Copilot or any of the generative AI AIs, is that it's verbose. It's verbose, and depending on the input, it's very accurate to the input. So if let's say I mention 4 things that were dirty in my room, right? It will, in an untrained generative AI response, it will mention all 4 of those things. It'll mimic those back, and have
which is not great by the way, for search.
No, it's not. And it's weird. It's weird to the guest because it's like, why are you listing all these things out? Why wouldn't you just say, we're sorry that things were not clean in your room. We're sorry that you had these cleanliness issues. We're working hard to, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's another big piece to what we looked at, is because we, like you said on the outset, we've had 2 million reviews, right? We have tons and tons of data, and the responses that we have created are from professional writers. So it's not like the input that we've created inside of this model is from the internet, right? Where you're subject to everything. You're subject to a short response. You're subject to a template response. Yeah. So that's where I think what we have developed is as close as you can get. And then at the end of that process, there's still a live person. So the hotel can still edit that response. They can still interact with it, but there's still a live person before that goes live to make sure that it goes through, that there's no anomaly in it.
And that's a peace of mind that is, again, we talked about some of those worst case scenarios, those PR disasters that might happen. Some even having to do with, again, slip and fall. You do not want that in the hands of without a real human touch on that. So it's kind of more of a hybrid solution than anything. All right. So for those hoteliers that might be kind of considering this and going the AI route, kind of what would you caution them as far as using either a hybrid model like TMG Smart Response or even another AI review response vendor?
Yeah. I probably have a unique view into this because of the number of reviews that we've responded to, because we're so close to, and we have so many different types of hotels that need response. And so what I think is fascinating to me still to this day, all the way, we're in 2025, and this is definitely a year for AI stuff, but I still feel like, what is your motivation? What is your goal? What is your why? So going back to review response, why do I do it? So am I doing it because it's a brand mandate? Am I doing it because, there's QA scores or there's guest experience scores on Expedia? What is my motivation to do this thing, this activity? And if your motivation to do this activity is for those things that I talked about earlier, guest retention, as a guest retention strategy, as a guest acquisition strategy, meaning that at the end of that funnel, when they're looking, they're going to read my responses and see what my brand and my version of hospitality is. I think it's critical at those points. I think that's critical information inside there. That's my opinion. So that's where the premium version of it, the live version, is where it's at. Now, if you're in that situation, you're like, man, I have a ton of reviews. I can't really afford to do all of this, this way, but I need to get these done, and I need to get them done in the best possible way. I think that then smart response or an AI response becomes viable. It's a great actual alternative. But again, like we were talking about, not all of these are they're not all the same. There's a big difference between what we're doing and what somebody who's like, hey, there's a need here. I pasted a review into this chat box and it spit back a passable response. Let's just go.
Yeah, I think, my suggestion would be a huge red flag is if you're talking to a AI review response vendor and the only thing they're giving you is a price. There's no questions about your property, what you're trying to accomplish, anything like that. Quantity of reviews is another great question. If there is no questions asked, that should be a huge red flag for you. And, I think, again, with the respond and resolve, we could be in a space, Jason, where we're talking in a year, maybe a couple years, where almost every review is going to have a response because of this new technology, which is great. And this right now, where we're seeing a lot of hotels that have 50% or in the low 30s or something like that. Some hotels management companies are doing a great job. They're in the 90s, but they're all templates, right? So what type of portfolio or review response strategy are you looking for? Because again, I think a great way to say is those hotel management companies that have a 95% response rate, but they're all templates. Is that better than 1 out of every 2 reviews having a true authentic response to it? Right. And that's, I guess, the question, because what's going to happen is that the tide is going to rise. And if everyone's doing it, then what's going to be the differentiator for you? And if it's live people, hospitality professionals responding to your reviews and getting that authenticity and trust through review response, that is a channel and a portal to do that and to get through to guests. So really exciting stuff. Thank you for joining us on the Sweet Spot and talking about this. Again, this is a very hot topic right now, and it's changing almost every single day. I think that's the other thing, is to try to stay up to date as much as you can, because these models, like you were talking about, they change so frequently. But as I was reminded by someone, is we're going to get to a space again where service is going to be, is AI is going to put service, real service, to a premium again. And I'm excited to be in that space and kind of see what that looks like. So any final thoughts before we wrap up, Jason?
No, just I think, again, I really want to stress that part. I know I've been like hammering that pretty hard, but I think you got to really assess your motivation for doing this and find the right motivation, because I think I shouldn't say I think, we've seen that it actually matters to the guest. It matters in a retention strategy. And I do feel like the better the response, the better the output. But it also there's a lot of complexity inside of it, something feeling authentic. So yeah, it's crazy because we're seeing these companies come out of the woodwork with just straight, an AI response, just, no touch. And
there's an inherent risk to that. Just like as if you were to put a microphone attached to ChatGPT and had every single guest come through the lobby and talk to them without any input from you or your staff, and we've both been behind the front desk before and know what can spot an angry guest about 20 yards away from us, the way that they're walking. If you're willing to take that risk of getting that feedback without any input from you or we're hospitality professionals that have years of experience of dealing with this, versus what we were talking about, some of the pitfalls of right now where generative AI is.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I mean, the technology is amazing and it's evolving, like you were saying. I feel like it's going in really incredible places. Like I said, that first time we were looking at these models, 4 years ago to today, it's an incredible advancement. And I think AI automation, all of these things, and I think we're going to see a lot of it in reservations. I think we're going to see a lot of it on the supply side. But
and that's a great point. If you're going to become more efficient, because I think that's where the FOMO is for hoteliers, is we're not efficient, and AI can create us being more efficient. Do you want to do it in a space that has such a direct connection to service and customer service for your guests?
Absolutely. All right.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jason, for joining me on the Sweet Spot. We'll definitely keep a close eye and ear. Maybe have an update for, when some of these technologies, because of how fast changing it is. Thank you for listening to the Sweet Spot, and we'll talk to you next time.